Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to camp, welcome to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning, and welcome to another edition of Urban Talks. Today, we have a special occasion. We have Davida Yarnolda here, and he will hold his lecture about his new book that is also partly about camp and about IPR, and we are really happy that this happened. We met David first 2 years ago, I guess, during the exhibition of Refik Anadol, and it was really inspiring me because we find out that we are interesting, and that's always good to hear. And now we can, and you can read about us in the first chapter of his book, Geography of Hope. We will talk about that book in a few seconds. I just want to mention that if you would like to join the discussion with David, Jiří Štyroky, and our guests from abroad, Jackie Black and Kaddu Sebuya, you will be able to do it via raising your hand, we will give you a microphone, or via Slido. So if you're watching us, welcome to camp, and you will be able to use slido.com, and if you will write Urban Talks, hashtag Urban Talks, there you will appear in very simple form, and you will be able to ask your question, and we will have the discussion after the presentations. As I mentioned, we will have two abroad guests. First is Jackie Black from Scotland, and we will talk about using GIS in education. Very interesting example, one of 9 examples that you will find in the book, but David will talk about it shortly, or in a few seconds. And the second presentation will be held by Kaddu Sebuya, and that will be presentation and lecture about using GIS for wildlife conservation in Africa, which is unusual example of using GIS because, as you know, GIS is mostly used as a spatial data system, and we use it here for planning the city. But this is another example of unusual usage of this software and data, and I hope that we will hear more about it. So now I would like to give the floor to Davida Yarnolda. Welcome here to camp, welcome back, and I will ask you for a lecture.
Thank you, Jiří. Good evening. It's so nice to see you here tonight. I want to thank IPR, I want to thank CAMP, and I want to thank my friends from Esri for helping me do this book. It's so great to be back 2 years after I was here last. So I met GIS when I was the CEO of the National Audubon Society. It's one of the largest conservation organizations in the world. And I was asked by my board to find a new vision for Audubon. And my vision was around protecting the most important places for birds and people. But first, we had to find those places. And that's how I met GIS. And if you meet GIS, all roads lead to San Diego, to the Esri conference every July, where 15 to 20,000 map geeks all get together. It's like a week-long religious celebration. And it was there that I heard amazing stories about how ports were built, or how companies decided where to put their next store, or about how militaries figured out strategy. But the story that I heard in 2015 was from Dr. Bruce Aylward, who was one of the top doctors at the World Health Organization. And I was sitting in the front row next to 2 very famous conservationists, and I had a severe case of imposter syndrome. And he talked about how he had stopped Ebola. He had stopped Ebola using GIS maps. And it took my breath away. And 7 years later, I woke up one morning and I thought, I'd like to do a book about the people who use GIS. There are lots of books about GIS, and I'm not a GIS expert. I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. but I wanted to write about how hard it is to make change in the world, because that's what people do. And so his story became the first story that I told. And on the same trip where I met Bruce Aylward, I came here. And I met IPR, and Yiji Staroki and Peter Urban from Esri were with me around the clock. And they taught me that this technology is really just a tool. So let me try to explain it for those of you who are not GIS experts, and for those of you who are, this is the comedy part of the night. So GIS, the way I explain it to people is, it's the most important technology that's all around us that almost nobody has ever heard of. And here's how it works. You start with a map or an image, and you put layers of data on top of the map or the image. So let's say in this case that this is, on the bottom, a map of Old Town. This is Prague. And the next layer, and so what we want to investigate is flooding. We want to know what in Prague, what parts of Old Town, of the old city will flood. And so the first layer is rainfall. The second layer is elevation. The third layer is drainage systems. The fourth layer is extreme weather events. And when you take all of those and you put them together, no matter what kind of problem you're trying to solve, what you see are gaps and opportunities. Because the real power of GIS is the ability for people to visualize the same problem and to share in the solutions. And so that's why the book title says, Real-Life Stories of Optimists Mapping a Better World. I find that GIS people are mostly optimistic because they can visualize. It's powerful. It gives you a sense of being able to contribute. And not everybody in every job can. And so that's what's at the heart of these stories. And the stories themselves are human stories. And I'll tell you what some of those are. The other image on the right, of course, you will recognize from the book. It's from IPR. These are, I picked the chapters based on whether they were representative of a really large user base, in this case cities, whether they were using the technology in innovative ways, and whether they were interesting stories and whether they were interesting people. And I found all of those here. In fact, it was so important that former mayor Thomas Hudacek told me that GIS is the life water of Prague. And when he said that, I was thankful for the title for the chapter and knew that it was going to be a really terrific story to report and write. What I found here was camp and IPR talking to its community, sharing problem solving. And the thing I took away, and that I've told people all over the world, is that you're not just democratizing data. That's a little bit of a cliche, right? You are democratizing democracy. And in a country that's, you are 35 years past communism, that's a pretty remarkable thing. And what I've told people in other places is that when you bring transparency to political processes, it's pretty hard to do corruption out in the open. And so this is what I learned that you do. I still have no idea what those accent marks are, but this is another story about transparency. This is about policing, and it takes place in Berkeley, California, a very progressive community that doesn't trust its police. And police are, as you know, policing is a topic, a hot hot topic. How to do policing in a modern era and to make sure that it's fair and equitable for everyone. So the police department in Berkeley said the most important thing we can do is to be transparent. And they used another GIS tool. They used a dashboard. This is, experts told me, the most transparent police department in America. Every time a police officer comes into contact with a citizen, even if it's just touching somebody in the arm, it gets recorded on the same day. No other police department in the US that I'm aware of does this. It's pretty remarkable. This is another democracy story. This takes place in California, in the Central Valley, an agricultural and oil community, where lots of communities, there are people in this community who have never had any power. The Latino communities, immigrants from Punjab, third largest Punjabi Sikh community in North America, and they've never had any power. And in 2021, they used GIS to draw new political boundaries. And because they drew new political boundaries, they have a member of their community who is now on the city council. In Africa, I found this remarkable story, and Kaddu Sebuya will talk to us tonight. I could have picked any conservation story in America. I had worked in conservation for 15 years, and I just didn't find anything that was as compelling as the idea of post-colonial conservation, conservation for and by Africans. And the organization that I found that was working across at least 10 African nations was the African Wildlife Foundation. And I also focused on this woman, Fortunata Msofe, who is the head of all wildlife in Tanzania. She started as a park ranger. She's a GIS expert. She's in charge of all of the elephants and everything else. And when I look at her and this 10-foot wide baobab tree, I see this picture, I see 4 giants. She's a remarkable person. She's also a big part of that chapter. One of the things that I found in doing the book was common human yearnings and traits, things that make us all the same across, excuse me, across nationalities, across oceans, across the world. I wanted to do a chapter about the big nonprofits, and I picked the humanitarian demining sector. And so I told this story. And the big thing that I learned in this chapter was a very simple truth. People just want to go home again. It doesn't matter whether they're in Cambodia or Laos or Ukraine. People just want to go home again. In the picture on the left, see that there's nothing there in those big polygons? It's a GIS word. I just threw that in for you GIS people. There's nothing there. It's a minefield. There's something there. In the slide next to it, sorry, in the picture next to it, 10 years after the mines are removed, there are schools, there are shops, there are roads, there are 50,000 people. People just want to go home again. The other story that I found in this chapter that completely surprised me was a gender equity story. It was only 15 years ago that women began to work in this field. And I met the pioneers who broke that glass ceiling, and they're in the chapter too. I wanted to do a chapter about businesses. And so I wrote about why FedEx and UPS only make right turns, because their GIS says that it's faster and saves time. I wrote about Chick-fil-A and McDonald's. I wrote about Nike. But I focused on the insurance industry because the insurance industry has images and GIS maps of every square inch of the United States, of the continental US, and Hawaii. And this is what, now, when I've shared this with audiences in the United States, this blows their minds. Because this is what the insurance industry knows. It knows if you have a pool. It knows if you have a hot tub. It knows if you have a trampoline that isn't on your insurance policy. It knows how many cars you have because it has this level of detail. And how does it know this? Because it flies 42 planes all over the United States every day. And this is from the pilot's iPad on the morning I flew over New York. And so there is a camera in the belly of this twin-engine plane. The camera has 8 lenses. It takes everything from infrared pictures to 3D. And inside, there's a little robot, looks like R2-D2. And it clicks and it whirs. And I kind of thought it was going to talk to me. And so when I asked if I could fly with one of these, in one of these planes, the chief pilot said, well, you could, but it's kind of like being in a Zamboni in the sky. Like, the first 15 minutes is interesting, and the other 3 hours, not so much. So that was very interesting. And businesses all over the world use it. It is one of those technologies that is all around us. It's in your cell phones. And one of the things I like to say to GIS people, if you're a GIS person, you're in the room, can you raise your hand? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have friends and relatives or significant others who understand what you do? All the hands came down. All the hands came down for those of you online. And this book is for them. This is for them to understand who the people who use GIS are. And so these folks are working on conservation projects in Africa. I'm going to finish with this little flyover of my book. No technology is inherently good or evil. Depends on how it's used, right? But GIS, it's a technology that I think is mostly used for good. And it was really a pleasure to write this book. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Eugene.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your lecture, David. Thank you for your kind words. And now I would like to ask Jackie Black if she can hear us. Yes, we can see you.
Hello.
Welcome to camp. Welcome to camp, Jackie. Thank you very much.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you very much for your decision to join us. And I would like to ask you for your lecture. Welcome to camp.
Thank you. I hate to transport us all back to COVID, but can you see my screen? I'm hoping that you can. Okay, so David really kindly interviewed me a while back in Edinburgh. So I'm from a tiny little place in the kind of Midlands of Scotland called Forfar, and I currently teach and have been teaching for the past 8 years geography. I work in Perth at the moment, but started off in the school that I actually went to as a child, which brought its own opportunities and challenges, as I'm sure you can imagine. But I learned to use GIS there for the first time after going to a geography teacher conference. And I actually have not looked back. I cannot imagine teaching without this resource now. And I'm currently lucky enough to be working in an environment where every pupil that I interact with has a one-to-one iPad. And that one-to-one iPad allows me to really bring GIS into the classroom at the drop of a hat. You know, I can really do it whenever I want to. So I'm keen to share with you now some of the kind of pros of using this kind of technology for me, and really why I love teaching with such a great piece of equipment. Hopefully, I'm going to show you lots of different things, and you can see just how flexibly I can use this. So the first thing that I want to show you is that really GIS is, just like David said, it's a set of layers. It doesn't need to be complicated. But in this case, it really allows me to start a bit of a conversation with pupils where they lead the learning rather than me doing that. So in this example, this is a set of layers where we have a map, and then we have some earthquake data in the orange dots, some volcanoes around the world in black diamonds. And all I do with classes is show them this one layer at a time. And instead of giving them a simple static map where I say, right, the pattern is the plate boundaries are where we find the volcanoes and earthquakes, and that's really 5 minutes of the lesson. That's all that really takes. Instead, we do it layer by layer, and we look at the earthquakes, and then we look at the volcanoes, and we ask questions, and we discuss as we go. And we have layers of data that we can click on to find out a little more. And the reason I love to do it with classes like this, rather than giving them that old-fashioned paper map, is that they really are part of the learning, and they really do lead themselves. So in this case, you can see that I'm able to stand at the front of the room. I'm able to give them the floor. I'm able to say, right, what questions do you have? And I find myself having really deep conversations and big themed conversations around, well, what is a caldera volcano? And why are there so many earthquakes? And how come that plate is smaller than that one? And why is that one moving faster than that one's moving slower? And previously, we wouldn't have had any of that discussion if I just gave them the finished map. So it's been really brilliant to lead this from the front of the room and be able to, in my current school, then give them the link to the map and say, right, go and have 5 minutes, go and explore yourself, go and personalize your lesson and click on the thing that's really interesting you. Being able to personalize the pop-ups and give those really keen beans some extra information is fantastic for me too. So when I say I can't imagine teaching with this any other way, I really do mean it. I have never given them a paper map since I discovered this, and never plan to as long as I can get away with it. So this is definitely the experience that my pupils now get on a day-to-day basis. And it definitely helps their learning. Another key reason that I really like to use GIS in the classroom is that it actually really helps when I use scene to accelerate the learning. So I don't know if anyone in the audience has ever attempted to teach a group of 11 or 12-year-olds how contours on a map work, but it's not exactly a simple feat. And sometimes it's just hard, especially kids that have maybe never experienced mountainous terrain or hilly terrain at all. It can be really difficult for them to grasp why these contours being close together means a steep slope. So using scene has actually been really quite revolutionary because it allows me to take OS maps and put them in 3D and actually show pupils what that symbology really does. And what you can see here is pupils exploring that map for themselves, zooming in and being able to take their own screenshots. Logan and Ollie would be horrified to know that they are on your screen right now. But they were screenshotting the information as they went and moving towards filling in a digital workbook that looks like this one. So normally, without this technology, I might well have stood up and said, okay, when we're looking for a quarry on a map, this is what we look for. But now it flips my learning and I'm able to give pupils access to the 3D maps and they tell me what I'm looking for. They tell me what the things are that are in common between 2 or 3 quarries around the UK. Some pupils might explore 5 quarries. Some pupils might only explore 11 or so. And it means that they kind of have a bit of control over their lesson. And those really intrigued pupils can go further. And those pupils that are struggling with the concept, I can go and help them in that time. So it really brings on pupils at the pace that they need and gives them visuals that I don't think any other software can produce. Oh, my slides are being a bit funny here. Oh no. I'll just be a second. Oh, that's a shame. I'm hoping that it's going to load up for you in a second. Sorry. I appear to have fried my laptop right before Christmas. Excellent. I think I am maybe going to have to restart this. So if you can bear with me for 2 seconds, I will restart the presentation and hopefully be able to share with you some more images. I'm so sorry.
We know that things that work every day won't work, so it's no problem. We understand you. We understand you. Maybe I can, in the meantime, reach David with a question.
Let me talk about the chapter that Jackie is. Yep. So Jackie, I'm sorry, I should have had the slide from the education chapter. The last chapter in the book is about education, and I wanted to do a chapter about how differently kids learn when they have GIS. And I could only find 2 countries in the whole world where GIS is a mandatory part of the curriculum. And one was it's England/Wales in the UK, but I was told about this terrific teacher in Scotland who told me that the standards in in England and Wales were okay, but they weren't quite as stiff as her standards. And so Jackie actually is a dynamo, and I had the opportunity to be in classrooms where kids, 5th grade girls, were like leaning over each other's backs to show them how to work GIS on their computers. And in one classroom in London, that's what was happening, except for one girl in the back who was tracking all of the stops on Taylor Swift's Eras tour. So Jackie, back to you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm really glad I sent over a backup set of slides. You're too kind, David. Can I get you just to jump on to the next one for me, if that's okay? That's where I was headed next. So just with this idea of scene, if you play that little video clip, this one is just another great intro and it gets kids really excited. So we do a little bit of a study of Mount St. Helens, and instead of me just saying, right, here's Mount St. Helens and here's what happened, we kind of explore it stage by stage, and it gives me an opportunity to ask questions of the pupils to check their understanding. And it just puts it in better global context than I could have if I was just telling the story myself. Here you can see that I can give them some fantastic 3D imagery of before and after what was a pretty catastrophic eruption. And it really just engages their imagination. They like to see the real data. They love to see where the earthquakes happened that we think triggered the landslide that triggered the whole eruption. And it just unpacks a huge amount of discussion that we just wouldn't have if I showed them a photo of it and said, right, that's Mount St. Helens and here's where it is on a map. You know, it's great for them to be able to interact with the different boundaries that are nearby, the data that we can put on top of it, and they just are so much more engaged and want to ask questions. So hopefully that gives you a flavour of why I love to use the 3D tools to really bring home GIS into the classroom. If I can get you just to jump on again. So the next reason that I really like to use this is because of the app called Survey 123. So the next few slides are going to focus solely on this use. I've used it in 2 different ways in the classroom. The first is actually where pupils are sitting in the classroom and they don't leave, and they do some research online and they begin to populate their own data sets. So rather than me asking them to describe and explain patterns of trade around the world with a textbook image, they populate it. So they look at the clothing labels on their jumpers and they think about the items that are most important to them, like their iPhone or their AirPods, and they go and find out, well, where was that made and where did it come to me from? And they populate the data set. So I think in this case, the screen that you can see here has somewhere in the region of 250 data points that my current 15-year-old pupils added to that map. And instead of just saying, yes, the UK is really quite globalized, we proved that point and we showed them for their class, where are their global connections? And I think Taylor Swift did actually crop up in this one. So we looked at entertainment, we looked at so many different elements. And the beauty of being in a one-to-one iPad school allowed them to look at this information layer by layer, so just entertainment or just medication, for example. They could then screenshot this information. And I think on the next slide, it'll show you just how much they were able to interrogate it for themselves and how keen they were to do this. So if I'd given them a static image of this, of lots of different trade around the world, I doubt that I would have had this kind of enthusiasm. But in this case, it actually worked really nicely. This next example is exactly the same thing, but just a different topic. So we looked at tropical storms, and instead of me giving them a finished map, they researched a whole load of storms, one for each category per person. So we quickly pulled together a really big data set. And it opened conversation around what is trustworthy information. Why are some countries suffering financially more than others due to the impacts of tropical storms? The blue colours in the background are the GDP for countries, and it helped the kids to really notice that there are patterns here. Really, it is that actually the cost is higher in some wealthier nations, but actually the human life cost is often considerably higher in other areas. And rather than me spelling that out to them, they worked that out themselves from the data that they had collected. We also noticed that a lot of them had been typing in hurricane rather than cyclone or typhoon. So that hugely limited our data and kind of brought in that natural discussion around data that we can trust and data that might not be complete. So this really just doing a bit of research from the desk, but making their own maps. Took a little longer, but they got so much out of it and really got them engaged. The next example is using Survey 123 in the way you might expect me to use it. So when we take them outside and we do some field work. In this case, we've had some fantastic days out with my most senior pupils, my advanced higher geographers. And they have to take on their own project. So in this case, we went to the beach, and a few of those images are actually videos. So if you click on them, they should work for you. But these are pupils that have got GIS in their phone, in their hand. They're at rivers, they're at beaches, and they are gathering data that they think is appropriate to compare to the models of beaches and to the models of rivers. And then they're able to manipulate that data for themselves back in the classroom and really quite quickly see relationships and begin to interrogate their own data. So much better than a soggy clipboard, I think you would agree. The next example that I have here for you is one particular pupil that I'm working closely at the minute with. This next pupil is Freya, and she is actually one of our school captains and is working really, really hard to currently pull together an amazing data set about flooding in her local area and the impact that it's had on people's housing. So if I can get you just to jump on to the next one, sorry. Thank you. So this is Freya, and both of those images on the left should play as videos. And what you can see she has here is that she has taken her Survey 123 app out with her. She has gone and interviewed people. She has gathered a huge amount of data from people up and down the length of 2 different rivers, one in an urban setting, one in a rural. And this amount of data she's then been able to pull into her school iPad and interrogate it for herself. And in her OneNote app, which we use constantly at Bertha Park, she's able to visualize this as graphs using Excel and is now able to fully explain the relationships that she can see. I simply cannot imagine doing that if these pupils didn't have access to Survey 123 in their phones and able to kind of walk outside and gather this information quickly. They're much more engaged. They're much more able to access the things that they need. And I'm just delighted that it's really coming together for Freya, because I think the findings from her research might actually be really quite meaningful, and she's only 17. A final thing that I want to highlight here for you is just the power of using GIS. I think David has done it in a much more eloquent way than I will. But putting this into the hands of pupils really is an equalizer. I'm well aware that I teach in a part of Perth where actually there really isn't a huge amount of diversity, and I am one voice. I want to make sure that I am covering everybody with the right amount of kind of emphasis where it's needed. So what I'm able to produce for pupils using GIS and an application called Hub is this digital atlas. So pupils are now used to clicking things and stuff pops up. That's just normal life to them. So this I pulled together from lots of different sources. And it's called our digital atlas, and it allows people to click into their maps and see whatever data they want to. And crucially, it gives them access to up-to-date data, even from other sources like Our World and Data and other kind of websites that I feel are reputable. And it allows people to really interrogate places that they're interested in, and makes people's kind of question maybe some misconceptions that they had about the world and how it works before. And I think really without this kind of data and without this kind of software in front of pupils, it would be really quite a challenge for me to kind of do some myth busting and make sure that they really understand the world around them. So probably one of the biggest reasons that I like to put GIS in front of them is because it really is the real world at their fingertips. And they can question it and ask me things and become involved. So hopefully I've given you a bit of a flavour as to what learning can look like with GIS, and why I really love to put some time and effort into learning more skills to make sure that things are best for my pupils. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you very much for your lecture. It was very interesting, and I understand why you were highlighted in a Geography of Hope. Now, let's go to another presentation, another lecture that will be held by Kaddu Sebuya, and it will be about his team who's using GIS for wildlife conservation in Africa. It was mentioned by David tonight, so I would like to ask him if he can hear us. Hi, welcome to camp. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, great. We can hear you, we can see you. Welcome to camp. Welcome to Center of Architecture.
You can see my screen?
Not yet. Now we can see it. Yeah. Yes, we can see it. So once again, welcome to camp. I would like to gladly give you floor and ask you for your lecture. Welcome to camp again.
No, thank you very much for having me, and great appreciation for David, who came to Africa and spent a number of days with us and captured what we are trying to do in the book. So thank you, David, for the opportunity. I think my presentation has been made easier, and I'm so thankful to Jackie, because what Jackie is doing in a classroom, we do it on a continent, and see how we can, protect, conserve nature, but at the same time, not as an end in itself, but as how people can really benefit, lead, and gain and lead their lives within the natural resources and sustainability to develop themselves. So this is our classroom. Africa is big, and I tried, I picked this from one of those internet maps, and you can see how big our classroom is. You can fit a couple of countries in Africa, but this is our classroom, and our students really political leaders, from presidents to local district officials to mayors, to farmers, to head of households, to churches, helping them make the right decisions. That includes management of natural resources, as well as their economic aspirations and their lives. So our business is wildlife, and I think David already mentioned that. And our mission is to ensure that wildlife thrives as Africa develops. So Africa is going to develop in so many ways, but how Africa develops, where it develops, is going to be critical to decide the space left for nature and how nature interacts with human species. And that's where GIS comes in. So sustainable development is critical for our work. Where Africa is, just to give you a background to why GIS is critical for us, is that there's rapid economic growth going on the continent. There is market-oriented solutions that are really political leaders and leaders of societies are focused on to see how they can help the human species develop economically. Urbanization is tremendous. So this is the fastest urbanizing continent in the world, and that comes with huge economic infrastructure. This photo shows a train going through a national park here in Kenya. Population increases. It's, Africa is now 1.4 billion, and the population is young. That's 70% of that population is below 40. And in a couple of 50 years, every four out of 10 people, young people, are going to be Africans. So the population is a big factor in our work, and how those people grow, where they grow food, how they house themselves, where they put their economic infrastructure is going to determine space that's going to be left for rivers, for trees, for wildlife. And that's where GS comes in. So we've used GS to map out areas that are high biodiversity areas on the continent. There are 43 of them. And we think that if these are really protected and managed well, wildlife might thrive as Africa modernizes and their citizens develop in so many ways like most of the world. This is where we work currently in Africa, and this map represents where we do work. And Africa itself, continentally, has a plan, a development plan, which has been mapped out on the continent, where the roads will be by 2063, where hydropower generation is going to be by 2063, mining places, airports. The continent has been mapped, and this development plan has been approved by heads of states of all the countries. Africa has 53 countries. But with GIS, David demonstrated how you can put layers and to find the gaps and opportunities. And that's exactly what we've done. This map represents high biodiversity areas on the continent. And then we put on a layer of the areas that we think are critically important for us to protect this wildlife. Then we put on the layer of the infrastructure that governments have decided to develop. And I pulled out many of them so that the map doesn't look busy. This one only shows road networks, railway lines, a couple of airports. I've removed urban centers and cities, otherwise it would have been and agriculture, huge agricultural projects. It would have been so busy. And now this shows the human activities that are going on the continent. Again, using data, as David demonstrated earlier. And then these are really what a map showing how Africa is likely to look like if things continue as they are. That's the current human footprint. You could see those the brown ones, the yellow ones, the development corridors, then the protected areas in green. And then the purple color, you see where the major species we follow are the lions, the cats in general, the elephants, the great apes, the rhinos, the giraffes. So those big mammals are critical for our work because if they survive, then the small ones will survive. So we map all those. So the map looks like that currently if the trajectory and the trend continues as it is. And what we are trying to, in our work, what we are trying to do is really to advise governments to change the trajectory, to do the right things, put the right things in the right place. We are not anti-development, but really advising governments to do development sustainably and do those roads in the right places, the hydropower generation plants be put in the right places. So Ezra is a big partner. David said, if you're looking at GIS, you're going to go San Diego. So that's exactly what we did. We've been doing working with Ezra for quite a number of time. And really what we do with Ezra is collect data so that we are able to map up, create maps that we can use to have the right conversations. These maps create stories because we don't do it. There's no experts who are doing it. Maps are done by communities. I think Jack said it empowers communities and people, everyday people. We arm them with smartphones that they collect data and which we use to create these maps so that we get into the right conversations and make the right decisions. We are helped by the explosion of technology on the continent. You could see, in 1973, in Africa, it was almost zero. It was only governments, but at a very, very low level. And look at 2021 data, an explosion of use of technology and satellites. The cell phone has really done it so easily. So, like I explained earlier, our work really starts at a continental level, where we look at what the development plans are. We move in at a national level, engaging governments in what are you doing, because the governments are the ones that are implementing a continental plan. So what are the governments doing? What data are they using? How are they deciding, making the decisions? And then we show them whether their decisions are right in terms of sustainable development and nature and biodiversity, which is critical for development, or that they are wrong, and how best they can improve. But the data we use comes local. We collect it from local to influence national decisions that then change the continental plan. So we do this. There's a lot of tools developed. There is a lot of convening right from the grassroots level. Just like Jackie just in the class, we go to a village or a county or a district or a town, convene and have a conversation about their development plan. Go ask the history, create maps how these areas were 40, 30 years ago, create a current map, use computers to project how they will look like in the future, and then start discussing what we need to do about it as a human species. So there's a lot of training because data is collected by everyday people. So the partnership is critical. The relationships are critical in our work. Trust is extremely critical. And then mobilization of people through convincing this so that we can get into the political arenas. So this is now one country, Uganda, where we've mapped it out. We know where corn is grown. We know where the soils are. We know where the water sources are. We know the rain partners and structures, both before and projected, or what's going to happen. And then we create maps that we take precedents and say, look, with your development plan, this is what's going to happen. If you can adjust it in so many ways, this is what happens. But also we do it at national parks level, where we track species like elephants that move miles so that we can protect their corridors. And then so that we can guide people in what they grow in the elephant path. Don't grow sugarcane there. Don't grow cassava there, because the elephants will invade your crops. So these are the type of crops that we need to grow in these areas, because we've tracked and collected data for movement of elephants and other species. So really, what we are doing is really to change the status quo, so that GIS people, conservationists, are allowed in boardrooms in decisions about national development plans. when they're being developed. They allow in financial decisions because they are using data. We engage banks, for example, in their mortgage planning because of water, and they advise them that, look, there's no water in the next 10 years in these places, and your houses are going to be very cheap because of water. So it's really changing that status quo, using data, using the maps, helping the decision makers to make the right decisions, and then leave them with a monitoring tool that they use to track and make decisions and adjust as they go and create mitigation plans in what they do. So lastly, let me narrow down to one of those landscapes in West Africa, in a country where we work, is Cameroon. Cameroon is found in the Congo Basin. You've all perhaps heard about the Congo Basin. It's one of the critical ecosystems for the world if we are to solve climate change. This area is mostly forest. About 70% of it is covered by forests. It's a very, very important area for the world. It absorbs more carbon out of air than the Amazon. And it emits more oxygen than any forest cover in the world. So it's a very, very critical ecosystem for us to survive as a planet. So our work there is critical in helping governments make the right decisions, put the right development plans in the right place. And I'll show you what we are doing in a very small area in Ja, which is mapping out a model for the entire Congo Basin. So this is a zoom-in area of where we work, and through our data we've collected with people, you find that the brown areas are really the human activities we've found around these areas, and the planning, and it has increased over time. You could see in these 2 years, 2022 and 2023, how that data moved. So when you zoom in here, you can see how big these brown areas are. Human activities, the work going on in this forestry cover that are unsustainable. This is mostly artisan mining going on, done badly and poorly, and leading to flooding, leading to more rain, washing topsoils, poor agricultural approaches, expansive agriculture going on here, and then poor government infrastructure planning that they've done. We load this because it's a public information. We load it to global systems that everybody can easily access live activities from these areas. But also these data help the park services to know how to monitor their areas, where more activities are done. So they increase their patrols in these areas. They convene communities and reporting areas. Just like David talked about California, the policing, this is almost that. You bring transparency in human activities in these areas. So it's really the result of that work from just this small area is really adaptive management. They've been able to change their ways, economic activities they've been doing, improve the approaches they've carried out, make new decisions and new plans that really accommodate, be able to live into a forest sustainably. But also because we post this on international data, they get help. There's very good response from UNESCO, very good response from other countries that have responded very well to fund some of these activities the government are implementing now in a very sustainable way. So right now, this landscape, they have a country plan for the entire forestry cover in the country. They have activities that the community have chosen, reforestation in those brown areas you've seen, and then the GIS team. These are local people that have been trained in partnership with the ESRE to read and who correct this data for us. So really, in conclusion, I'm talking to GIS guys. I mean, for us, we're excited about the power GIS has given local leaders and the non-scientific people like economists that have now, are understanding the conversations we've always wanted to have with them, but now with the data and maps, it has become so easier to have that conversation. The conversation we're having with the political leaders and presidents, telling them that, look, your hydropower generation plant, this is what it's going to cause. It's going to flood these areas. It's going to affect these agricultural areas. It's going to change the land. You might want to do it differently. Or I had a conversation with a president who was telling your water sources are from these forests for your dam. So you might want to increase the budget for conserving the forests in order to maintain your water volume that are going to go through your hydropower generation. And his response was that this is wonderful. I'm going to do that because I thought you've come to stop me from producing hydropower generation because the water has important snakes and birds. So this has really helped to demonstrate that as conservationists, we are not tree huggers. We don't like animals more than people, but we just want to support an ecosystem so that we can coexist with the species that are so critical for our survival as a human species. So I don't see how we could have managed to do this at scale, at the speed we are now doing it, without GIS. So thank you very much for having me. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to invite you and also Jackie to join our discussion in a few moments. But now, since it's the launch of the book, I would like to ask David and Jiří to join me here, and you will take a picture together. Since we have very expensive floor, so there won't be any sabrush or any breaking bottle of champagne. But I would like to ask you to take a picture to remember this moment. And I would like to wish the book many readers, many inspired readers, because I think that the best launch of the book is actually reading it. So, thank you. I will take that. Thank you. No? Okay. You have many, You can write another book for yourself. Okay, so I will ask my colleagues if they help me with chairs. Actually, I will be just standing here and they will do the work. Thank you, guys. I'm not helping. And David and Jiří, please come and join me. I will also ask you, Kaddu and Jackie, if they will be available here for discussion, and I will ask you to prepare your questions. We also have a Slido, as I mentioned. If you were watching the stream, you can ask question via slido.com, which is actually, please guys, please, gentlemen, choose your chair. We have a nice situation. This is actually our 3D model of Prague that we use. Sometimes it looks more like a picture than a model, actually. That's a question. David, you have seen so many examples of usage of GIS. In a meaning of the level, how people use the abilities of the software and data that works with. What you have seen, what you have witnessed, is it like that it is on a high level everywhere in the world, and or if there's something like that you think that if they move on another level, we will see another perfect examples and stories if they move somewhere else. And is there something like we can help them while sharing experience, etc.?
I think that the GIS community it's a culture. I think that it's a global culture. And I've seen people use the same tool. Jackie talked about Survey 123. The policeman on the cover in that first photo was using Survey 123. The park rangers in Kenya were using Survey 123. It's a technology that levels up, and it's useful no matter how sophisticated people are. But I think that the greatest superpower that GIS people have is not their data, but knowing how to collaborate. I think that that's what makes a difference. And for me, well, that's awesome. For me,
it just, for Jackie, there was a huge Jackie all over the world, all over the wall. So it was a super Jackie. Sorry.
So I just want to.
Oh goodness me.
I just want to comment that the book took 2.5 years to. The book was 2.5 years in the making, but when you think that tonight you had here in Prague story, you had Kaddu telling the story of the African continent, and you have Jackie talking about a universal learning experience, but based in Scotland. What started as a collection of chapters, I now realize, and for me personally, it's a global community of friends. And it's really terrific to be able to be here tonight with that global community of friends.
Okay.
So thank you.
Next, I will ask Jiří about the introduction of the project itself, because for us it was GIS. For us, it means something. So if you can introduce how we work with that and what we shared with David while the book creation.
For us, at the very beginning, it was a big surprise that David chose Prague as the example of GIS, using GIS as the city. It was not amended just for the planning, but it was just GIS. What means the GIS for the city? And when I was observing all this great presentation, I realized that really what we have in common is not the team what we are researching, what we are working with, but how we are thinking, the hope, or David told it optimism, right? Something like that. We have hope that things can be better, and that we have tools to use to make the city, the wildlife, the pupils better persons. And in Prague, we are focusing through the planning to improving the community, and that's why we do have camp, why we do have all these activities. And GIS is quite a powerful tool because it allows us to explain things to people who are not planners and who are just doing the other jobs, which are also important, but they are living their completely different lives. And it's quite hard to explain complex things, but maps are tools which are enabling this. So this is the core of our activity.
It's interesting that when we do something, people always ask us how much does it cost, why you do it. But when we share an app or something that helps people to go through the map or something or some data, they never complain. They're always happy. They start clicking and don't have time to ask question if it's expensive or if it does not. Do you have some feedback from the community or from community of GIS that we do something more, or is there more than other, or there is something that inspires us from the community? Like when you read the book, or if you met someone from another part of the world, is there something that inspires us to do more with the GIS or with the data? Is there something that you would like to achieve while using it?
Definitely, it's about the tiny things. We in Prague use many things. We all share the same technology. It must be said. It was issued by S3 Press, so we use the S3 technology as the ground, and all we use the similar tools. But what is inspiring is that how we do it and which part of it and how we use the symbology, how we talk about that, how we create dashboards, how we communicate with people. And for me, both examples was quite inspiring, and they are things in that. For example, with pupils, in Prague, there are some activities for children and for pupils, but I'm not sure how many schools use direct GIS, not the schools which are focused on geography or geodesy or something like that, but the basic schools using Survey 1, 2, 3, or working with dashboards or working with online tools. I'm not sure that there is much schools, and it would be quite nice to do it.
Yeah. I asked David before what he thinks that is the next big thing for all these, I mean, teams and cities who use GIS, and you told me that it's simplification, that it will be easier to use it. And I would like to ask you to explain that, and I would like to ask our guests if they will agree with you, because we have seen that even kids can use it. So what does it mean, simplification? Can you explain that?
GIS is a technology that's gotten progressively easier to use through its entire lifespan. It continues to get easier, and that enables more people to use it. So when I started the book, a handful of organizations mentioned AI, and 2 years later, everybody claimed it was a part of what they did. And so AI obviously is going to be a game changer. I think that drone technology of all types is going to be a complete game changer. But I think that the real game changer will be people who are more capable of using it. Jackie talks about how hard the technology was to learn, and she stuck with it, and it's become easier, and now she can do it in her classrooms. And I think that that's what will continue to happen. So I'm interested in what Jackie and Kaddu think too.
Jackie and Kaddu, I will ask Jackie first. Do you agree with that? And what do you think is the next big thing in the meaning of simplification, for example, or the usage of the software?
No, I definitely do agree. So having used GIS for the first time in university, I was exposed to it in its most complicated form, and it was somewhat terrifying to begin with. But the way that I'm introducing it to pupils is so simple. And I think they are digital natives. They are just used to clicking things. They're just used to the way that their phone works, that they don't even ask questions about that anymore. So I think because our next generation are so IT literate and so digital in everything that they do, I think that's the only next step, is that it will be simplified and that everyone will contribute to huge data sets all of the time. I think then the conversation needs to be around, do we know what data sets we're contributing to and all that sort of stuff, which we definitely try to bring that out in kids as well. But I think, as David said earlier, around it being, it's a tool that can be used for good or bad, but actually most people are using this for a good cause. I think that's kind of my job, is to make sure that our pupils have the skills and then have the want to use it for the right thing. I'm just looking at a map that I used with my pupils today, and even thinking about the 5 short years that I've been using this map that I'm looking at right now is so much simpler and so much more accessible, which means that we get more done. So yeah, I totally agree. It just keeps getting better.
Okay, Kaddu, do you agree with that?
I totally agree. And I think that, like I showed you in my presentation, technology now has really upped up, and everybody's using their smartphones, so it's become so easy and natural for them. But I think what is important, at least from our work, is that it demystifies the idea, the product itself. people are involved. The maps are drawn by them. You know, they collect the data, and the maps, they draw the maps, and they own the maps. They own the results of the maps, and they're able to see the results of their work, and that generates a conversation around their areas. It's about location. This is about them. This is about their place. This is about their activities. This is about their future. And the map, there's nothing else that demonstrates that when everybody sees the outcome, which is a map showing the area. That has been so powerful.
What do you think? Maybe ask you if you would like to ask some questions, because you have a chance to speak with people who use the software all around the world, and so it's a rare chance. If you would like to ask any questions, feel free. Just raise your hand and we will pass you a microphone. Or if you, gentlemen, would like to add something, because I asked Jackie and Kaddu if they agree, but you maybe heard something that inspired you for another reaction. My next question is about availability of the software, because we are talking about technology that maybe is still not available for someone who might use it. Maybe it will change his life, or maybe if he or she will available to work with, show us the new way how to use it. Maybe is aspiring to be the 10th story in the book. Do you think that there's something to do about it? How to make it, available for everyone in some way?
There's no shortage of tutorials available on the web. The publisher of my book, Esri, is the dominant software provider of GIS tools in the world. And Esri produces lots and lots of informational videos to teach people who are trying to improve their skills or to learn basic skills. But the other thing I would say is that I would say ask a GIS professional. They're incredibly generous. I mean, they like to share their knowledge, and that's why they get 15 or 20,000 of them together in July every year in San Diego, is that they like to share what they know. It is not a community that keeps secret, except for the parts that are military or intelligence-oriented. But even in their communities behind closed doors, they share generously too.
Do you agree with that, Jiří? Do you think, because you know most of the community in Czech Republic, how does it work there? Do you think it's easy to get more information, start to work with the software, get more information how to use it? Is there always someone to ask about it?
Surely yes. We have quite good background at universities, also some gymnasium or geodetic middle schools. Yes, but what is the gap? That if you are at the university, if you are at school, you learn how to use the technology, how to use GIS, how to make a map. But if you are then at the planning department, at the culture conservation or environment protection or whatsoever, you are thinking in a way of how to save nature or how to make a good plan. But you have to learn how to combine this subject to using the map the best way, and this is hard. Because it's not easy to combine all the stuff together. It's not easy to find a way how to communicate with a group of people who are in charge of that field, and this bubble has their mindset and their way of communication, their language, and you have somehow find how to make a hole in the bubble, to open it, to find the language for that.
I think one of the reasons GIS is going to grow tremendously in the years ahead is because of the market. I think there are going to be lots of jobs. And I think that young people will flock to the subject. It's usually GIS and something else. You know, I look at Jackie's students, or I think about Kaddu's point that, you know, 7 out of every 10 people on the African continent are under 30, right? That it's usually GIS and oceanography, or GIS and biology, or GIS and city planning. But increasingly at the university level, GIS is a discipline that is combined with others, and there are going to be more and more jobs in the future.
Kaddu, what's the situation in Africa? Because it's for us sometimes we forget how great and huge continent of Africa is. What's the situation in universities in Africa? In the meaning of the context that we are talking about, the availability of the software and communities that are available to share this knowledge in every language that is needed to.
Yeah, no, it's picking up, like I said, in terms of technology, but the discipline is not yet grown. The merger between science and economics, you know, science and sociology, science and conservation, it hasn't really connected at the level we want, but it's starting. David is right. The young people are really embracing it. And from our work and others, we are seeing this growing within government departments, and it's a request in some countries. Now in Rwanda, you can no longer produce any development plan without having mapped out and zoned out and demonstrated the impact beyond your gate. So governments are also, you know, coming up with these policies that are going to really force business to respond in a very, very positive way. So I'm very, very optimistic about the applications. The universities are not yet there, and there's more work that needs to be done. Fewer universities are starting this conversation, and I think they will respond to the demand, because now the demand is going to start from financial projects are now requiring mapping out these things. Industries are now required to do that. So as this demand grows, the universities will respond, at least. But I must say that young kids, they don't need to go to classroom. It's amazing when you give them these tools. They figure it out, you know, and among themselves, they figure it out and they know how to do it. They don't have to go to a university to learn how to do it. They're creating laboratories themselves. They are creating startup companies that none of them is a GIS expert, but they just respond to the demand, and it's just through workshops, as you know, and they pick it up and they run with it. That's a simplicity of this area.
Thank you. I will ask you again if someone has a question or something to add to our discussion or the topic. You have a chance to ask a question or raise some topic to solve. Yes? Welcome to discussion.
Hello, Jiří Dale. I work here on IPR. Thank you for the lectures. I have a question. If you think that the spread of GIS can be enhanced by, and please don't be afraid of it, by modern warfare, and I'm not talking about a military application or anything, but what we see now in wars in Ukraine or Syria, for example, is that the maps and GIS systems are everywhere. When we are talking about a reconstruction or like newspapers and all the webs and everything, can you elaborate about it a bit, or do you think
it's a really, really, really interesting question about whether conflicts can actually increase the reach and visibility of GIS and its use? And sadly, it's yes. I don't know if you remember, but when the Russian invasion of Ukraine first happened, about 2 days after, there was a satellite image that was seen around the world of a 40-mile-long line of Russian armor stuck on a one-lane road. In the room here, people are nodding, yes, I remember this. That image 5 years ago would have been classified. That was military intelligence. And now it was part of the public discussion. And everybody that was an expert epidemiologist on Twitter suddenly became an expert in military logistics. And it's because of GIS tools becoming more available. And so we also know, I started the week at NATO headquarters the day after Assad fled. And I will tell you, there was a sense of energy Monday in Brussels. And we were meeting with the GIS team, and they were telling me how important it was to the real-time decision-making 3 days ago that was happening that led to, I'm sure, Israel's bombing in Syria, the US's moves in the Middle East. All of that was happening in real time with bigger and bigger teams with more and more sophisticated tools. One of the biggest challenges that the intelligence community around the world faces is too much data. They have a hard time digesting the amount of data that they get. It's not just you. It's them too, only in real time with lives on the line. So your question is a great question. It's absolutely true, sadly, that the proliferation of conflict will lead to greater application of GIS tools. It's true.
Thank you.
Yeah, David, may I jump in and perhaps the last point I'll make, because I'm going to drop off, I'm afraid it's getting late here. But in applications of war, GIS, I met somebody from Netherlands 2 weeks ago who has created a red flag army that actually what it does is in places of war, it uses GIS and maps out areas that are hospitals, that are schools, that where people have gathered within the war zones, and that is posted out to the UN system, and now it's shared to enemy forces that these areas are Red Cross areas, school areas, community areas, and somehow, although they are both enemies, they are not allowed to bomb these areas. So GIS has been so helpful. It has saved lives in wars because it maps out these areas that the both adversaries agree that those are green zones, and therefore they are no go to do, although they are in the war area. So we will see these applications grow as conflicts grow as well. So there's a good use also of GIS within that war setup. But Mr. Moderator, I just want to beg to drop off at this time, if you may allow me. Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you, Kaddu, and thanks for that contribution, and thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe last two questions. First for Jiří. Sometimes I say that actually very often, that we have more data and more knowledge than Prague is actually available to use. That they are not able to use everything to, I say them, but we are part of them, part of the city, of course. But we have so many knowledge and so many data about Prague that the city hall is not available to, not able to use it. Is there something that can help us with, or help the city? Is it like the implementation of the data and the knowledge from GIS and everything we have to be able to do it more effectively? Is there something like that?
a funny thing talking about that. Tomorrow morning we had a discussion that we have not only the more data than we are capable to use, but we are much more data than we are capable to store. Well, so you're right. What is helping us in terms of technology is that we've got much more cloud solution, the service which are not necessary to be hosting in on-premise, and services and new ways of storing data, manipulation with the data, publishing the data, and the most on the top, how to visualize the data through integrated tools, which is quite important, like dashboards, like storytelling maps, like this thing, which enables very complicated data sets simplified to very tiny and easy to understand solution. This is important. But what is on somewhere hidden is the capability, increasing capability to store and analyze and manipulate the data, which far exceeds the capacity of cities and companies. This is bottleneck and quite important technology point.
And I think that the key to that is, and I'll close with this, the key to that is introducing GIS to decision makers who are not GIS experts. Because when politicians or leaders or school principals understand the power of GIS that their GIS leaders bring to them, people like Iji or Kaddu's terrific staff in DC or Jackie, that when they see the power that's available to them, they'll use it more. When they recognize that they'll be more successful, they'll use it more. And that's why the Geography of Hope tells stories about people who have taken on real-world problems, and because they are optimists by nature, they have driven to solutions.
And last question, you have visited these 9 stories, these 9 rabbit holes. Which would be the one we try to explore more in the second book, for example? What topic would you like to explore and go deeper in? If you would like to choose one, which would it be? What?
I would like to pursue where these new technologies are going to lead, where AI is going to lead, and where the drone tech. I would like to do all of that. But I think what I would really like to do is to come back to the chapters that I wrote and to see how much things have changed in between those 2 efforts. Because it really is, GIS is a culture, and it really is a global community.
Okay, Jackie Black, Kaddu Sebuya, Iri Čtyroky, and David Yarnolda with his book Geography of Hope. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Jackie, for joining us. Thank you for your participation and lecture. And I would like to just mention that we have some books prepared for you. So if you are interested in a signed copy of Geography of Hope by Davida Yarnolda, they are available there. So I will ask David if he might sign some copies for us. And I wish you Merry Christmas. It was the last event in camp before Sunday's closing of the exhibition. So it was nice here with you. Thank you.